it was a mistake. The war in Iraq, we spent $2 trillion, thousands of lives. We don't even have it. Iran is taking over Iraq with the second largest oil reserves in the world. Obviously, it was a mistake.
So
George Bush made a mistake. We can make mistakes, but that one was a beauty. We should have never been in Iraq. We have destabilized the Middle East.
But so you still think he should be impeached?
I think it's my turn, isn't it?
You do whatever you want. You call it whatever you want. I want to tell you, they lied.
Okay.
They said there were weapons of mass destruction. There were none, and they knew there were none. There were no weapons of mass destruction.
All right. Governor Bush.
The American invasion of Iraq on March 20th, 2003 was meant to disarm Iraq. Iraq allegedly possessed weapons of mass destruction, according to Western media. However, by the end of the war in May, none of these weapons were found. The war turned out to be a hunt for immortality. It is speculated that the true intention of the war was to find and exploit the tomb of Gilgamesh. The war broke shortly after a German team led by Fassbinder used ground-penetrating radar near the Euphrates River and identified what looked like a large underground complex, possibly Gilgamesh's tomb. Aside from being the hero of the world's oldest epic, the Epic of Gilgamesh, Gilgamesh was the king of Uruk, which is modern Warka in Iraq. Gilgamesh is listed in the Sumerian king list as the 5th ruler of Uruk, reigning for an extraordinary 126 years. He constructed fortified walls around Uruk and marvelous buildings reflecting advanced Mesopotamian technology at the time. After the death of his friend Enkidu, Gilgamesh set himself on the course of finding Utnapishtim. This man, Utnapishtim, was the survivor of a great flood, the flood connected to Noah's story. The flood meant to cleanse the earth of special human species, and we'll talk about these species later. Utnapishtim tells Gilgamesh that immortality is reserved for the gods. This is a small extract from the Epic of Gilgamesh. However, let's pause and clarify a few important details. So, Gilgamesh reigned Uruk around the 26th century before Christ, but he embarked on a journey to find a survivor of the Great Flood. With reference to the Mesopotamian flood, which occurred at around 2900 before Christ, Gilgamesh was chasing someone who lived 300 years before his existence. This is clearly off. Secondly, Gilgamesh was described as a giant in Mesopotamian texts. This man was roughly 5.2 up to 5.5 meters. And this, to put it into context, he was 3 times taller than the average Sumerian man. This body size, it matches the description of giant men in the Bible. So, we find the book of 1st Enoch. This is coming from the Ethiopian Bible. It corroborates some verses in Genesis chapter 6. I'm just quoting directly. The Nephilim were on the earth in those days, and also afterward, when the sons of God came in to the daughters of man, and they bore children to them. These were the mighty men who were of old, the men of renown, and this is from Genesis chapter 6, verse 4. Unfortunately, not all giants were destroyed by the Great Flood, because it's said that the intention was to cleanse the earth of the corruption brought about by these great men. So, unfortunately, not all of them were destroyed. For example, Israelite spies, as they gathered intelligence about the country of Canaan, the report mentioned, and I'm quoting, "And there we saw the Nephilim, the sons of Anak, who come from the Nephilim, and we seemed to ourselves like grasshoppers, and so we seemed to them." This is from Numbers chapter 13, verse 33. We also know about Goliath. During the time of David, Goliath was taller and bigger than the average population. So it is not surprising to find out that Gilgamesh is another descendant of Anak from the Nephilim race. So if the tomb of Gilgamesh contained his DNA, that DNA can be cloned with the current technology. Cloning is a technology all about producing an identical species from an existing DNA. So, along with other ancient relics, the war on Iraq was indeed another quest for immortality. If indeed that team of Germans discovered the tomb of Gilgamesh. However, a few characteristics of the Nephilim human race, it raises eyebrows. First, Enoch describes a species with high metabolic rate. These people, they were eating to the point of depleting human resources. When humans reached a point where they cannot compensate, the symbiosis turned into a predator-prey relationship. This is coming from First Enoch. An example of, if we find Enoch's literature, if this race existed, it is an example of successful reproduction between beings of different species, between beings of different DNA. So this reproduction gave rise to a mutated form of DNA, one that was significantly altered to call for God's intervention. And I'm quoting from Genesis chapter 6, verse 2. "The sons of God saw that daughters of men were attractive, and they took as their wives any they chose." Verse 3 says, "Then the Lord said, My spirit shall not abide in man forever, for he is flesh. His days shall be 120 years. I can't reiterate enough DNA changes occurring due to this verse. This statement is just doing wonders, because before the flood, we can see people living so long. But then from now, these DNA changes are very significant, that the days are going to be 120 or less. So, the DNA segments that render immortality to cancer cells, they dramatically reduced at this point in time. And these DNA segments are called telomeres. This is the end of the first part of this video. This series is covering the human genome and the DNA, that's what I'm referring to, and the story around it. I hope you find this helpful.